The rain in Seattle doesn't just fall, it seeps into your bones, much like the realization that your entire life has been reduced to 34 black drawstring trash bags piled unceremoniously on a cold, oil-stained garage floor. I stood there, my hands still clutching a happy 30th birthday cupcake I'd bought for myself from the bakery down the street, watching the frosting melt into a pathetic gray puddle. It was 6:47 p.m. I had just finished a 12-hour shift as a senior paralegal at a high-stakes litigation firm. My heels were killing me, and I was looking forward to a quiet glass of wine in the room I had occupied for the last 5 years. Instead, I was looking at my life's work, my professional blazers, my childhood yearbooks, even my expensive skincare, tossed into the dirt like literal garbage. I am Anna Kennedy. I turned 30 years old today. I have spent the last decade working 60-hour weeks, navigating the labyrinth of property law and civil disputes, all to keep a roof over my family's head. This exact moment, I felt the kind of coldness that doesn't come from the weather. It was the absolute crushing silence of a betrayal so deep it makes your ears ring. I dropped my keys. They hit the concrete with a sharp metallic clatter that echoed off the walls of the garage. That's when I saw it, a small neon-pink sticky note slapped onto the topmost bag, which I realized contained my grandmother's vintage quilts. In my mother's elegant looping cursive, it simply read, "Move these to a storage unit by Sunday. Elena needs the space for her vanity and textbooks. Happy birthday." My breath hitched. My favorite cousin, Elena. The girl who had spent 22 years failing upward on my dime. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt a strange, terrifyingly calm sensation wash over me, the kind of calm a person feels right before they go into shock. I walked toward the internal door leading from the garage to the kitchen. I could hear laughter. It wasn't the sound of a family celebrating a milestone birthday. It was the sound of a party I wasn't invited to. The smell of garlic butter and expensive ribeye, my favorite meal, wafted through the cracks of the door, mocking my empty stomach. I pushed the door open. The scene in the dining room was something out of a twisted sitcom. My mother, Margaret, was pouring a glass of vintage Cabernet into a crystal glass for Elena. My Aunt Sophia was there too, clapping her hands and pointing at a catalog of IKEA bedroom sets spread across the mahogany table. Elena was wearing my favorite silk robe, the one I'd saved up $200 to buy for my birthday treat last year. She looked up, her eyes widening for a fraction of a second before settling into a smug, cat-like grin. "Oh, Anna! You're home early," my mother said, her voice light and airy, as if she hadn't just evicted her daughter on her birthday. She didn't even stand up. She just adjusted her glasses and took a sip of her wine. "We were going to tell you over dinner, but I suppose the garage surprise gave it away. Elena got into the local community college. It's a huge step for her, and she needs a quiet place to study. Since you're so successful and independent, we figured you wouldn't mind moving your things out to make room for her." "My things are in trash bags, Mom," I said, my voice sounding like it was coming from 1,000 miles away. I looked at the table. 3 plates were set. Not 4. "You put my clothes in the dirt. On my birthday. And you're wearing my robe, Elena." Elena just giggled, pulling the silk tighter around her shoulders. "It looked so cozy, Anna. And besides, Auntie Margaret said you wouldn't mind. You're always saying how much you love investing in family." My mother's face hardened. That soft, maternal mask she wore for the neighbors slipped, revealing the cold, calculating woman I'd lived with for years. "Don't be dramatic, Anna. It's just stuff. You're 30 now. It's honestly a bit embarrassing that you're still living in your childhood bedroom. We're doing you a favor, really. It's the push you need to finally find a man with a house and get married. A woman your age shouldn't be worrying about property. She should be worrying about her biological clock." Cruelty of it was a physical blow. I felt the blood drain from my face, my fingers trembling as I reached for the counter to steady myself. "A man with a house? I pay the utilities here, Mom. I pay the property taxes. I paid for that steak you're eating. My mother let out a sharp, mocking laugh that cut through the air. You contribute, yes, but this is my home, my sanctuary. And if I want to give my niece a chance at a future, I will. You've had your turn. Now go wash up. There's some leftover salad in the fridge if you're hungry, but we're finishing up here. We have a lot of decorating to do in Elena's new room tonight. As I stood there, silenced by the sheer audacity of their entitlement, my mind began to drift back. This wasn't a sudden shift in the weather. It was a storm that had been brewing since I was 10 years old. I remember the day my father died. He was a quiet man, a carpenter who smelled of cedar and sawdust. He left behind a small life insurance policy and a mountain of grief. While I sat on the porch steps, clutching my doll and wondering when he'd come home, I overheard my mother and Aunt Sophia in the kitchen. You have to make sure Anna knows her place, Margaret, Sophia had whispered, her voice thick with a greed she never quite hid. She has his eyes. She'll have his stubbornness. If you don't keep her under your thumb, she'll take everything he left. Think of Elena. She's the delicate one. She's the one who needs us. From that day on, I wasn't a daughter, I was a resource. While Elena was bought ballet slippers and designer dresses, I was told that hand-me-downs build character. The flashbacks hit me in waves as I stared at them eating. I remembered my high school graduation. I was valedictorian. I had a full-ride scholarship to the University of Washington. I came home glowing, holding my diploma, only to find that my mother had sold my car, the one I'd bought by working 2 jobs at a diner, to pay for Elena's spiritual retreat to Bali. You have a scholarship, Anna, she had told me then, not even looking up from her crossword puzzle. You don't need a car. Elena needs to find herself. She's lost, and you're so sturdy. You'll manage. I remembered the sturdy Anna years. College was a blur of caffeine and textbooks, working 20 hours a week in the law library while taking a full course load. I never went to parties. I never went to Bali. Every time I managed to save $1,000, there was an emergency. Aunt Sophia's roof leaked. Elena needed a new laptop because she spilled a latte on hers. My mother's nerves required a weekend at a spa. And always the guilt. After everything I sacrificed to raise you alone, my mother would say, her eyes welling with practiced tears. You're going to be selfish now? Over a little money? The most vivid memory, the one that burned the hottest, was from 3 years ago. I had just been promoted to senior paralegal. I was making $85,000 a year, a fortune compared to where we started. I came home and told my mother I wanted to look at buying a small condo of my own. She didn't congratulate me. She had a heart attack. Not a real one, the doctors later told me it was a panic attack brought on by stress, but at the time it felt like the end of the world. She clutched her chest, gasping that she couldn't live alone, that the house was too big, that she'd die of loneliness if I left her. How can you leave me in this drafty old place? She'd sobbed from her bed while I held her hand, terrified. The taxes are rising. The roof needs work. I'll end up in a state-run home, Anna. Is that what you want? To see your mother in a cold gray room because you wanted a condo? So I stayed. I stayed and I poured my savings into this house. I paid for the new HVAC system, $12,000. I paid for the kitchen remodel, $25,000 that Elena was currently leaning against. I paid for the professional landscaping that gave the house its curb appeal. I looked at Elena now, picking at a piece of steak with her perfectly manicured nails. Nails I'm sure my mother paid for with the grocery money I gave her last week. Elena was 24, had dropped out of 3 different colleges, and had never held a job for more than 2 months because the managers were mean or the vibe was off. But in this house, she was the golden child. She was the one who needed nurturing, while I was the workhorse who existed only to pull the carriage. Anna, dear, stop hovering, Aunt Sophia said, waving a fork at me. You're making Elena nervous. She's very sensitive about this transition. It's hard for her to move into a new space. You should be helping her feel welcome. Welcome. I whispered, the word tasting like ash. In my own room? It's not your room anymore, Elena chirped, her voice high and grating. I've already picked out the paint. Sunset blush. It's going to be so much brighter than that drab gray you have. And I'm putting my vanity right where your desk is. You don't need a desk anyway, you spend all your time at that boring office. I looked at my mother. I searched her eyes for a flicker of regret, a hint of the woman who used to tuck me in and tell me I could be anything. There was nothing. There was only a cold, hard greed and a terrifying sense of ownership. She really believed she could just discard me the moment a better option, a more compliant, delicate niece came along. She truly thought I was just a tenant in my own life. You really want me out? I asked, my voice steady now, the adrenaline finally starting to kick in. I want you to grow up, my mother snapped. I want you to stop being a burden on my household and go find your own life. You've become very cold and transactional, Anna. It's not attractive. Now please go deal with those bags. The trash pickup is early Monday morning and I don't want the garage cluttered. I turned around without another word. I walked back into the garage and stood among my trash-bagged life. The smell of the wet concrete and the cheap plastic of the bags filled my nose. I reached into my work bag, my fingers brushing against the cold, stiff leather of my portfolio. Deep inside, in a hidden pocket I'd kept locked for years, was a heavy, cream-colored envelope. They didn't know. They had no idea what I had been doing for the last 5 years while I contributed to the house. They thought they were the masters of this domain, but they had forgotten one very important rule of law. Possession is 9/10 of the law, but the deed is the whole damn thing. I pulled out the document, the gold seal of the King County Recorder's office shimmering under the flickering garage light. I looked at the happy birthday cupcake on the floor. It was ruined. But as I stared at the legal description of the property, the house my mother thought she owned, a slow, predatory smile spread across my face. It was time for a lesson in real estate. The sound of their laughter followed me back into the garage, a jagged contrast to the rhythmic drumming of the rain against the metal door. I knelt on the cold concrete, my $400 wool slacks soaking up the dampness, and pulled my laptop from its padded case. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a surge of adrenaline so potent I could taste copper in the back of my throat. I opened my private cloud drive. Folder, Project Independence. Subfolder, Financial Records 2021 to 2026. I scrolled through the spreadsheets. It was a digital map of my martyrdom. $1,450 a month for the mortgage my mother claimed she was still paying. $300 for the premium utilities. $200 for the HOA fees. Then there were the emergencies. My eyes blurred as I read the line items. March 2023, Elena's dental crisis, cosmetic veneers, $4,200. June 2024, mom's roof leak, actually a designer sofa, $3,500. I had been a human ATM, fed by a diet of guilt and the desperate hope that if I just gave enough, I'd finally be loved enough to be respected. The screen flickered, reflecting the tears I refused to let fall. I remembered the day I found out the truth. 2 years ago, I was filing paperwork at the firm when I decided to pull the title deed for this address, just to see how much was left on the mortgage so I could pay it off as a surprise for Mom's 60th birthday. My heart had nearly stopped. The mortgage had been paid off in full by my father's secret supplemental insurance policy back in 2012. My mother hadn't paid a cent in over a decade. She had been pocketing my rent to fund her and Elena's lifestyle while telling me we were one missed payment away from the streets. I didn't confront her then. As a paralegal, I knew that anger is a tool but patience is a weapon. I had quietly contacted the bank, then a real estate attorney. I discovered that due to a specific clause in my father's will, a right of survivorship tied to a trust for his only child, the house had legally transferred to my name the moment I turned 25. My mother only had a life estate, a legal right to live there, but only under strict conditions. She had to maintain the property and pay the taxes. Which she hadn't. I had. I stood up, clutching the folder. I could hear the scraping of chairs in the kitchen. They were finished with their celebratory steak. "Anna," my mother yelled from the other room, her voice sharp and commanding. "I told you to move those bags. I want the floor swept before Elena's new vanity arrives tomorrow morning. Don't make me come out there." I walked back into the kitchen. The air was thick with the smell of expensive grease and arrogance. Elena was leaning back in her chair, scrolling through Pinterest on her phone, pointing at pictures of boho chic bedrooms. "Oh, Auntie," Elena cooed, not even looking at me as I entered. "We should really get a professional organizer for the closet. Anna had so much junk. It's going to take weeks to get the sad out of those walls." "I agree, darling," my mother said, smoothing her hair. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing at the folder in my hand. "What is that? More work?" "Honestly, Anna, this is why you're single. You're obsessed with paper. Now get to work in the garage. I've already called a junk removal service for anything you don't have moved by 8 a.m. "You called a junk remover for my life's possessions?" I asked. My voice was a low, dangerous hum. "I called them for the clutter," she corrected, her lip curling. "If you value it, you'll move it. If you don't, it's trash. Just like your attitude lately. Now go. We're going to have tea and plan the color scheme for the hallway." I walked over to the table and tossed the folder directly onto Elena's Pinterest-filled phone. The heavy clack of the cardboard against the wood made both of them jump. Elena let out a little shriek, clutching her chest. "Ugh! Anna! You almost broke my screen." "Read it, Margaret," I said, ignoring the cousin who was currently wearing my clothes. My mother scoffed, picking up the top document with 2 fingers as if it were a soiled napkin. "What is this? Legal gibberish? You think your little paralegal job gives you the right to—" Her voice died. She hit the second page, the one with the bolded, underlined section detailing the termination of life estate. Her face went from a flush of anger to a sickly, mottled gray. "What is it, Auntie?" Elena asked, leaning in, her smug smile faltering. "It's a notice of material breach," I said, stepping closer until I was looming over them both. Section 4, Paragraph B of the Kennedy Family Trust. The life estate granted to Margaret Kennedy is contingent upon the occupant's responsibility for property maintenance, taxes, and, most importantly, not committing waste or ouster of the legal fee simple owner. "The what?" Elena blinked, looking between us. "The legal owner is me," I said, my voice cracking like a whip. "Dad didn't leave you the house, Mom. He left it to me. He knew your sister and her daughter would bleed you dry, so he protected it. He gave you a place to stay, but you broke the contract. You've been stealing my rent money for years while I was the one paying the actual taxes and the insurance. And tonight? Putting my belongings in trash bags and attempting to evict the actual homeowner to give my room to a non-resident? That's ouster. That's a terminal breach." My mother's hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. You can't do this. I'm your mother. I raised you. And I paid for it." I roared, the sound echoing off the high ceilings I had paid to have painted. "I paid for the food in your stomach, the wine in your glass, and the very chair you are sitting on. You didn't give Elena my room, Mom. You gave away your last shred of my mercy." Elena stood up, her face twisted in a mask of fake outrage. "You're being crazy, Anna. It's just a room. Auntie, tell her she's being crazy. We're family. Family." I turned my gaze to Elena. The girl flinched. "Family doesn't wear my clothes while throwing my childhood memories into a damp garage. Family doesn't plot to replace me in my own home while I'm at work. You want this house, Elena? You want a sunset blush bedroom?" I leaned down, my face inches from hers. I could smell the expensive wine on her breath, the wine I bought. "You have exactly 1 hour to get out of my house. Both of you." "You wouldn't," my mother whispered, her eyes wide with a terror I had waited a lifetime to see. It's raining, Anna. It's dark. Where would we go? I don't know, Mom, I said, picking up her wine glass and pouring the rest of the dark red liquid onto the IKEA catalog. Maybe you should go find a man with a house. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of the Cabernet dripping off the edge of the table and onto the hardwood floor. My mother's face had shifted from a ghostly pale to a frantic, blotchy red. She looked at the soaked catalog, then at the legal documents, and finally at me. For the first time in 30 years, she saw me, not as a bank account, not as a sturdy workhorse, but as the person who held her entire world in the palm of her hand. Anna, please, she stammered, her voice losing its sharp edge, replaced by a pathetic, high-pitched whine. You're upset. It's your birthday, you're tired, we'll move the bags back. Elena, help her. Get up and start moving those bags back into the room right now. Elena didn't move. She was staring at me with a mixture of fear and pure, unadulterated venom. She's bluffing, Annie. She's a paralegal, not a judge. She can't just kick us out in an hour. There are squatters' rights. I looked it up on TikTok. I actually laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound that made Elena flinch. TikTok law? That's your defense? Let me explain how real law works, Elena. This isn't a landlord-tenant dispute. This is a breach of a trust-stipulated life estate. Since you aren't a legal resident and have never paid a dime of rent, you're a guest. And your invitation has just been revoked. As for you, Mother, you signed a declaration of residency 3 years ago for a tax break I organized. In that document, you acknowledged me as the sole owner and yourself as a permissive occupant. By attempting to exclude me from my own primary residence, you've committed ouster. I have the sheriff's non-emergency line on speed dial, and I have the deed in my hand. Would you like to see how fast Seattle PD responds to a homeowner reporting a trespasser? I pulled my phone out and placed it on the table. The digital clock flickered, 7:22 p.m. 58 minutes left. Panic finally set in. My mother scrambled out of her chair, her knees knocking against the table. Anna, you can't be serious. Sophia. Say something. Aunt Sophia, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally found her voice. She stood up, smoothing her expensive knit sweater. Now, Anna, let's be reasonable. We're all family here. Elena just needs a start. You have so much, you're a senior paralegal, you're successful. Why are you being so greedy over a few square feet? It's ungrateful. After everything Margaret did for you. What did she do, Sophia? I snapped, stepping toward her. Did she pay for my college? No, my father's insurance and 3 jobs did. Did she pay for this dinner? No, I did. Did she maintain this house? No, I spent my weekends painting, fixing leaks, and weeding the garden while she and Elena went to brunch on my credit card. You've lived in her ear for 20 years, telling her I was just a tool for your daughter's comfort. Well, the tool is broken. And the bill is due. I pointed at the door. Sophia, leave. Now. You don't live here and you have no standing. If you stay 1 second longer, I'm adding harassment to the police report. Sophia looked at my mother, then at me, and seeing the absolute deadness in my eyes, she grabbed her designer handbag, another birthday gift from Auntie Margaret that I had indirectly funded, and bolted for the front door without a single word to her daughter. The house felt larger once Sophia left, the air a little cleaner. But the rot was still sitting at my dining table. Elena was now crying big, fat, performative tears that would have moved me 5 years ago. Now they just looked like leaky faucets. I have nowhere to go, Anna, she wailed, her hands clutching my silk robe. All my stuff is at my mom's tiny apartment and she doesn't have a guest room. I need this. I already told everyone on Instagram I was moving into a luxury heritage suite. Then I guess you'll have to post an update from the back seat of your mom's car, I said. I walked over to her and held out my hand. The robe? Give it to me. What? She gasped. The robe? You're wearing my birthday gift to myself. Take it off, or I'll include theft of personal property in the list of grievances I'm handing to the officer. With trembling, humiliated hands, Elena untied the silk sash. She was wearing a cheap camisole and leggings underneath. She threw the robe at me, her face twisting. "You're a monster. No wonder no man wants you. You're cold and bitter and I own the roof over your head," I finished for her. 45 minutes. I turned to my mother, who was leaning against the counter, looking every bit her age. The nerves she had used to manipulate me for years were finally failing her. "Mom, you have a choice. You can pack a suitcase for the weekend and stay with Sophia while we figure out the legalities of your permanent departure, or you can stay here while I call a locksmith and have the internal doors to the common areas deadbolt. You'll have your bedroom, but the kitchen, the living room, and the laundry are off limits. I'll treat you like the tenant you've treated me as." "But Elena? She leaves tonight." "She's a child, Anna," my mother cried. "She's 24. I was managing a law office and paying your property taxes at 24. I screamed, the frustration of a decade finally boiling over. "She is not a child. She is a parasite, and you are the host. And I am the one who is tired of being the blood supply." I walked to the hallway and grabbed my mother's expensive leather suitcase from the hall closet, the one I'd bought her for her recovery trip to Arizona last year. I marched into her room and began shoving her clothes into it. Not with care. Not with the gentleness I'd shown her for years. I grabbed handfuls of cashmere and silk and stuffed them in. "Anna, stop. You're wrinkling my things. You put my life in trash bags, Mom. You put my grandmother's quilts next to a bucket of old motor oil." I threw the suitcase onto her bed. "You have 30 minutes. I'm going to the garage to start bringing my things back in. Every bag of mine that is still on that floor by the time the clock hits 8:15 is a month of back rent I will be suing you for in civil court. I have every receipt. Every bank transfer. I've been building this case since the day I realized you lied about the mortgage." I walked away from her protests, back out into the garage. The air was cold, but for the first time in my life, I felt warm. I looked at the 34 black bags. They didn't look like trash anymore. They looked like a cocoon. I reached down, grabbed the first bag, the one with my professional blazers, and hauled it toward the kitchen door. As I passed the dining room, I saw Elena frantically texting, her eyes darting around the room as if she were looking for something to steal. I stopped. "Elena? If a single piece of silverware or a decorative candle is missing when you leave, I will report it. I'm a paralegal at a firm that specializes in property crime. Don't test me." She froze, her hand hovering near a silver salt shaker. She looked at me with pure hatred, but she pulled her hand back. I checked my watch. 8:02 p.m. The sturdy daughter was gone. The owner had arrived. Clock struck 8:15 p.m. with a mechanical chime that sounded like a funeral bell for my mother's authority. I stood in the center of the kitchen, my damp blazers draped over the back of a chair, watching them. Elena was hysterical, her face a smeared mess of mascara and spit as she shoved her textbooks and expensive makeup palettes into a duffel bag. My mother was standing by the front door, clutching her suitcase, her eyes darting around the foyer as if she expected the walls themselves to apologize to her. "I can't believe you're doing this," my mother whispered, her voice cracking. "In the rain, Anna. On your birthday. Your father would be ashamed of what you've become. A cold, heartless bureaucrat." I walked over to the front door and pulled it wide open. The smell of wet asphalt and pine surged in, a bracing slap of reality. "My father left me this house to ensure I'd never be at the mercy of people like you, Mom. He knew your sister would move in the moment he was gone. He knew you'd let her. He didn't leave me a house, he left me a fortress. And today I'm finally raising the drawbridge." Elena stomped toward the door, her heels clicking aggressively on the hardwood I had refinished last summer. She stopped in front of me, her chest heaving. "You think you've won? You're going to be all alone in this big, empty house with your deeds and your clauses. Nobody likes you, Anna. Not even your own mother. Enjoy your birthday dinner alone. I will, I said, my voice as level as a horizon line. Because at least the company won't be stealing from me. Oh, and Elena? Before you go. I reached out and snatched the designer handbag from her shoulder. She shrieked, reaching for it, but I stepped back. I zipped it open and pulled out the silver salt shaker she'd tried to tuck under her phone. I tossed the shaker onto the rug and handed the bag back to her. I told you. Not a single piece of silverware. The look of pure, impotent rage on her face was better than any birthday cake I could have bought. She let out a guttural scream of frustration and ran out into the rain toward her mother's idling car at the curb. My mother lingered for a second. She looked at me, her expression shifting one last time into that soft, manipulative pout. Anna, baby, let's just talk. I'll send her away. I'll tell Sophia she can't come over anymore. Just let me stay. I don't have anywhere else. Sophia's apartment is so cramped and the guest bed is just a sofa. You should have thought about the cramped sofa before you put my grandmother's quilts in the trash, Margaret, I said, using her first name for the first time in my life. Felt like breaking a spell. I'll have a courier deliver a formal option to vacate settlement by Monday. If you sign it, I won't sue you for the $174,000 in diverted funds I've tracked over the last decade. If you don't, I'll see you in court, and I'll make sure every one of your country club friends knows exactly how you spent your daughter's inheritance. Her jaw dropped. The threat of social ruin was the only thing she feared more than poverty. She didn't say another word. She gripped her suitcase handle, tucked her head against the wind, and walked out into the dark. I slammed the door and turned the deadbolt. The sound echoed through the house, thwack, the sound of a closed chapter. The house was silent. For the first time in 5 years, the air didn't feel heavy with the expectation of someone else's needs. I walked back into the kitchen. The steak was cold, the wine was spilled, and the IKEA catalog was a soggy purple mess on the floor. I picked up the catalog and dropped it into the kitchen trash can. I spent the next 3 hours moving my bags back in. It was exhausting. My back ached, and my hands were raw from the plastic handles, but every time I dragged a bag across the threshold, I felt lighter. I brought my books back. I brought my blazers back. I found my grandmother's quilts. They were a bit damp, smelling of the garage, but they were intact. I draped them over my bed. The familiar patterns of blue and white felt like a hug from the only person who had ever truly loved me without a price tag. At midnight, I sat on the edge of my bed with a fresh glass of wine, the good stuff, the bottle I'd hidden in the back of the pantry for a special occasion. I pulled out my phone. I had 17 missed calls from Aunt Sophia and 3 vitriolic texts from Elena. I blocked them all. Then I opened my contacts and called the one person I knew would answer. "Hey, Ben," I said when my best friend picked up. "I know it's late, but I'm officially a homeowner. A real one. Do you think you and Sarah could come over tomorrow? I need help painting a room. It's currently sunset blush in my head, but I'm thinking something more like midnight storm." Ben laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "We'll be there at 8, Anna. Happy birthday. You okay?" "I'm more than okay," I said, looking at the deed sitting on my nightstand. "I'm home." I laid back against the pillows. The rain was still drumming on the roof, but it didn't feel like it was seeping into my bones anymore. It sounded like a cleaning. I realized then that my mother was right about one thing. 30 is a milestone. It's the age where you stop being the person everyone else wants you to be and start being the person you actually are. I wasn't just sturdy Anna anymore. I was Anna Kennedy, the woman who took her life back from the trash. As I closed my eyes, I didn't think about the lawsuits or the empty rooms. I thought about the morning sun hitting the kitchen, my kitchen, and the smell of coffee that I wouldn't have to share with anyone who didn't respect the hands that brewed it. I fell asleep to the sound of the rain, finally, blissfully alone. I hope this story met your expectations for an emotional, high-definition drama. Would you like me to generate an image of Anna standing in her newly reclaimed midnight storm room, or perhaps write a follow-up update post about the court case?